Hello and thank you for buying Henson's Flying Machines Junkers D1. This kit comes on 6 sheets of laser cut balsa wood. Comes with the parts list here. Begin to build the kit by marking off each part according to the numbering on the parts list. To build this kit you will need a sharp knife, super glue or balsa cement, a small pencil, and you can use any 90-degree edge to help you align the parts together. After marking, to remove each piece from the laser cut sheet, gently cut the tabs holding the piece in place and lift it carefully out. The first parts you will need to begin assembly are parts 1A, 1B, 2A and 3A. These will be the first parts you assemble to start making the fuselage shape. Part 1A and B are the sides of the fuselage. These are held together with part 2A, which fits into the second slot back at the bottom of the fuselage like so. Cut away one of the spare corners of the sheets to use as a 90-degree angle, which will help me align the part. Get that down flush and then glue it in place where it passes through the body and at the top, just making sure that it sits down firm and straight. Again, remember to keep checking that it is at 90 degrees to the fuselage. Part 3A fits just forward of the cockpit recess, plugging into the slot at the top, and as you can see it aligns on the bottom just below there. Use your 90-degree edge to align it and then just glue it vertically. Make sure that the tab is solid in the top. Just hold it at 90 degrees until it's set. The next part to use is part 4A, which fits into the tab just rear of the front of the nacelle, like so. Again, using your 90 degrees, make sure that it's sat down flush. Glue along the edge, especially where the tabs join up, and ensure that it is 90 degrees. Like so. With those pieces in place, you can slot over part 1B, which will fit over the arm of part 2A, and then align that into the slots of 3A and 4A at the front, like so. Make sure that they're all slotted into place. Glue along the tabs and on the inside where the wood meets. Make sure to make a strong bind here at the wing brace and on the inside of the cockpit. As you can see already, the fuselage is starting to take shape. Part 5A forms the bottom of the engine housing here and sits into the top here, on top of part 2A, and then butting forward part 4A. Now you will have to make sure this is horizontal, sitting on 2A forward like so. Once you're happy that it's sitting flush, glue along the edges. Along both sides. And then also to the forward mounting here. That will give you a lot of strength in the nose. Having affixed the engine support, we now move on to the rear of the cockpit, part 6A, which fits into the tabs just to the back of the cockpit here. Careful not to crack the balsa wood as you slide it in. If it is a very snug fit, just trim the tabs ever so slightly by filing them back or trimming them with your craft knife. Make sure that they fit flush on both sides, squeezing them together, holding the bottom in place, like so. You can now test fit this next part, which is part 7A, by dry fitting it into the bottom of the front and rear of the cockpit, parts 3A and 6A, and adjust it a little bit like so, just to make sure that it's fitting the way you want it. And then once everything is flush, you can glue along the seams of part 6A. Especially where the tabs move through the fuselage framework. And then where part 7A sits into part 3A and 6A. Glue along all of the seams for a little extra strength, and along the tabs as well. As you'll feel now, the fuselage is now quite strong. Can seal up any areas that may need a little extra strengthening, and just make sure that you have a very strong framework you're happy with there. The next part to fit is part 8A, which is a nacelle former. That fits just here below the central hole in here and acts as a strengthening support if you're going to want to put a motor in its plane. Align it just above the curve of the front. Make sure that it is squared off against the shape. Adjust until you're happy. And then glue in place along the sides and the back. This can be put at any point along this straight edge along the front, wherever you want to put in strengthening, like so. Part 9A forms the front of the engine nacelle. Now, to decorate this, you can fit a little bit of black card behind it or some mesh. I find a little bit of black fabric works. You'll note that the shaft hole here is a vertical slot. That's so that you can mount the engine at different heights, or your rubber motor will pass through here as well. This butt lines over the top here and glues to the sides and to part 8A. So to align this, you need to align it to the top of part 4A using part 15A or B, just to give you an idea. That will allow you to align it as it will fit underneath here. Align it just gently like so. As you can see, the bottom of that triangle fits just about to the top there. Glue all the way along the edge. The seam. Just apply a little bit of pressure from the outside there to make sure that the wood is touching, like so. With the nose coming together, it's time to start tapering the tail using part 10A. This slots into the two tabs here to the rear of the cockpit. Now, you're going to need to slightly trim these tabs due to the curvature of the fuselage. Do so using a flat edge and just peel away a little bit of the material on both sides. You can also just very gently sand this, which works just as well. And then just dry fit that into the tabs. Slow, gently pinching the rear of the fuselage together, and then making sure that the ends are aligned, like so, before gluing along the inside edge and into the tabs. Make sure that you get a good seal all the way down to the bottom of the fuselage. To begin assembling the tail unit, you will need parts 11A, 12A with the optional cutout section which we're going to leave in for this one, parts 13A and B, the side supports, and 14A, the tail plane. Begin by slotting part 14A, the tail plane, into the slot on the back of the tail. Bring that all the way forward flush. Being very careful not to put a finger through the delicate diamonds. The triangular part goes underneath like so, fitting up snug. Can be adjusted to fit correctly. Then these parts fit in line with the circle there, slightly back of it, holding them together. Make sure that they're parallel, and then with a 90-degree edge, adjust those parts to make sure the tail plane fits at exactly 90 degrees. Like so. Once you're happy with the way the whole assembly sits together, glue along the seam like so, and where the tail plane sits into the upright, on both sides, making sure that the whole unit is securely fastened together. At this point, it's also a good idea to run a little glue along the length of the tail skid. This will seal the balsa wood and make the whole assembly stronger for any landings. To begin fitting the assembled tail section into the fuselage, you'll see that the triangular part fits into these two recessed slots on the top of the fuselage. Lay this on top like so. Pinch the fuselage tail together slightly so that it aligns towards the back, and allow those to rest in there. Centralize it. Make sure that it fits down firm. It's important to get this right, so check and recheck. Turning it over to make sure that it's a nice flush fit. Once you're happy, glue along these seams. adjusting as you go. So allow that to settle in place before you move it. And just keep checking it's right until it is all settled. Once it's fixed, you're going to want to glue where the two sides of the fuselage meet the inner tailplane there, and then you can of course just sand this down flush, get a nicer rounded finish on it. To begin putting together the engine assembly in the front of the cockpit, start with part 15A. Now align this flush with the nose like so. It will also come in flush with the inner compartment and with the inside of the cockpit. Now make sure that this follows the center line like so. Any overhang can be sanded or shaved away later, but make sure you're happy with where it's sitting. Then glue along the top all of the center ribs and the side of the fuselage. And very carefully align, starting from the front, backwards, like so. As you can see, there will be a very slight overhang to give the curvature of the cockpit, and a little overhang on the sides which we'll trim away later. With this in place, we can then start assembling the engine itself, which is parts 16A, B, C, D. As you can see, these are different profiles. These parts are all the same. The manifold part, part C, is different, and the top of the engine goes on last. So, beginning from the front, put the first section in place, aligning it to the holes in the engine mounting. Glue that section, the front and back, being very careful not to foul the slot on the inside. Once the first is in place, dry fit the second, check that it's where you want it, then again attach it to the first, the little glue along the top. Making sure that the holes are parallel. The manifold will sit coming out of the side there, and the profiles are in place to build up the height to get the manifold clear. Once you have it in place, just keep checking the height until the manifold sits flush and clear. Like so. As you can see, these form the sides of the exposed pistons of this engine. Now, you can build your manifold either to the left or right, it doesn't matter, whichever way you prefer. And then finally, the top of the engine fits exactly like so. It may need to be pressed forward just to come into contact with the front. If necessary, there might be some trimming. I'm going to very gently just trim away this front edge here, just so that it fits flush within the nacelle. And once we're happy with that, do it in place, all the way up flush to the front. Like so. Now, you can very carefully sand between the cylinders, just to give it a more flush effect, if wanted. We then close the engine bay using the other part, dry fit it in place, like so. When you're totally happy with it, I'm going to slightly trim the inside here, give it more of a flush fit to part A. Like so. Again, make sure that it's aligned to the front and glue along the tops of the fuselage. To finish the engine detailing, part 17A is the tappet covers, which fits into the slots down there and very gently is pressed into place. Now, don't worry if you do snap this, you can glue the parts in separately. Just needs a dab of super glue on each end. Hold it in place, make it strong. Now, before going any further, it's a good idea to trim away any excess on the sides of the nacelle. Just very carefully. You can sand this back as well, whichever works easier for you. And then just a little along the top as well. If you are covering it, of course, you want a smoother finish. A little bit of sanding goes a long way. And you can also round off the exhaust manifold a little bit, just on the outer edge. But again, be very careful. You can add a little bit of super glue to the exhaust manifold along these delicate edges here, just to give it a little more strength for any impacts and such. Again, it's always with the grain that you might suffer breaks, so just be wary of sealing grain on any of those joint points there. You can now add in the detail of the machine guns, which are parts 22A and B, and the side support for those, which are 23A and B. And these very simply, part 23A glues over part 22A, making sure to align the two holes at the top with the same shape, leaving the attachment tabs below free. Yeah. Dry fit those, a little bit of super glue to seal. And then align them like so. And once they're dry, trim these parts flush. And if you want to add that extra little bit of detail in for any painting or anything, you can just round off the square of the very barrel of the machine gun. But again, it's a very minor detail. Like so. And then repeat the process for the other side, making sure that you are building a mirror image based on the fact that the detail of the machine gun will go on the outside of the aircraft. Allow that to set. Begin fixing the first machine gun. Right, with the extra detail on the outside, dry fit it into the two slots on the top of the nacelle like so. Make sure that they are parallel to the fuselage, and then just use a little touch of glue, fix them in place, align them upright vertically. Same with the other side. Put them in, and then align them vertically. As you can see, the machine gun triggers lay over the cockpit and the barrels extend, clearing both sides of the engine and the nacelle front there. With the fuselage all complete now, it's time to start work on the two wings. Now the wings come with ailerons that can be cut out and then put on a hinge. In this case, I'm going to glue them straight in place, as this is going to be a free flight model. I'm going to glue along the seam here and also along this edge here. Just allow that to set. To build the wings, you'll need about 18A or 18B and the wing profiles that come with the kit. Now, when building the wings, it's very important to make sure that you are building mirror images of them. As both wings are the same, it's very easy to end up building two left or two right wings, and then you'll have to peel all of the parts off and start again. So, that in place, begin with your first wing profile, and starting from the outer edge, place it in, and then align it flush with this edge here, and glue it to the front, back, and where it meets the edge of the wing, as well as to the aileron. Just allow that to set for a moment. Then, moving on, the inside of the wing, exactly the same. All of the wing profiles are the same on this model. Set it in place, glue to the front, rear, and along where it meets. Those are your two main wing profiles. Let them set firmly before continuing. For the rest of the wing profiles, use your 90-degree angle and then begin aligning them like so. Count in two of the wing cutouts, place it in place, use your 90° to set it where you want it. Glue on the rear, like so, and along the front. Moving further in, again, count 2 spaces, place it, align it with the 90°, glue the tail, and along the front of the profile. The next one, again, comes in counted 2 inside and glued along the tail and the front. Now, the spacing for the remaining profiles is by judgment. You can measure and mark your little 90°, give you a rough estimate, but you need 1, 2, 3 profiles. The latter part, there are 2 remaining wing profiles. Space these equally along the rest of the wing in front of the aileron, like so. Then just adjust using your 90° and glue along the back and to the aileron itself. This is, of course, if you're not adapting it. Powered flight, if you are, simply trim away the back of the profile in front of the aileron, which will allow it a full circle of movement. Now, with one wing in place, lay out your next wing as a mirror image, like so. The profile is facing in the same direction, and then build up the wing so you're sure you have a left and a right wing. Laying the 2 wing sections aside for now, we need to put the bottom of the wing onto the fuselage, which is part 19A. Now, this fits into the slot like so and needs to be aligned very carefully on both sides. Once you're happy with the fit, carefully glue along the seams, both sides, and along the back where it touches the underneath of the cockpit. At this point you'll notice that there are 2 extra guide holes in each side. These are if you want to make extra balsa strengthening struts in there, or add a little bit of wire or carbon. It's not necessary though in most free flight models or in a static model. With the bottom of the cockpit in place, we can start putting on the side details, the engine parts 21A and B. Now these fit onto the side like so, and if you are covering and you want to paint them, you can put them on afterwards, but at this stage we're going to put them on here. The top of it needs to be flush with the side of the engine, and the front flush with there. As you can see, the extra detail on there will be revealed, and it'll sit on top of the wing mount. Once you're happy with the alignment, glue along the edges to hold it in place, along the front to give it a bit more strength, and also to the wing guide. One thing to note is to leave the 2 holes exposed here if you're going to add any rigging thread to it later. Flipping it over, you want to do exactly the same thing. Make sure it's aligned in the same way on the opposite side, and just bring it into place like so. Glue along all the seams and hold it until dry. To build up the top of the rear of the fuselage, you'll need parts 24A, B and C. You'll notice that part 24A is slightly shorter. That goes in the middle, lying into the receiving slots, just like so. Now align that until you're happy with any excess forward, which you can trim back later, and then just glue where it passes through. These parts. 24B works exactly the same, fits into the notch on the outside there, and then lines up with the tail plane, excess to the front. Glue just here and here. The same with part C on the opposite side. Making sure you're happy with the fit. Using your knife, just gently trim away any excess wood forward of the rear of the cockpit. Just using the sharp edge to slice through there, like so. There is one more piece of cockpit interior detail that you can fit, which is optional, part 28A. This forms the rear of the seat, like so, and can be glued flush into place. Again, this is optional. You can fit it further down as a seat support. You can fit it flush like so. If you are fitting it to form the curved rear of the fuselage, you need to very slightly trim the edges, just in line with where you're going to fit it inside of the fuselage. Just like so, and then glue on the edges and also to the rear of the fuselage. Give the glue a moment to set before moving on to attaching the wings. To begin attaching the wings to the fuselage, hold your model at an angle, align the wing stem with the bottom of the wing support, and then allow it to fall upwards to touch the wing support protruding from the side of the fuselage. Check your alignment and then glue along the bottom part here. And along the wing support. Then align and rest up using that wing support spar. Guide the final angle of the wing. Once that's set in place, you want to go over all the joints with extra glue and then fit the opposing wing. just supporting that there. Add extra glue to the wing spar, and on the inside there. Get that bond very nice and tight. The next part you're going to need is parts 20A and B, which is the wing spar that runs the length of the wing. This fits into the top of the wing profiles. Once it's dry, you can pat it down, bring it flush up to the side of the fuselage. Right, so if there is any differences in the profiles, you can trim them back slightly just to get that spar fairly straight. Allow it to dry first. With the wing securely glued in place, fit the wing spar into the top of the wing profiles, pressing down, making sure that it is butted up strongly against the fuselage. And press it into the top of each profile. Making sure that it is flush with the top of the profiles, and then glue firstly to the fuselage inside and then along the top of each wing profile. Right, so with the outer edge slightly protruding, just shear it away at an angle carefully, which will help you when covering later. Next step is to attach the opposing wing in exactly the same manner, making sure that it is at the correct angle as dictated by the wing spar. With both wings in place, you can see the aircraft is almost complete. You can see the angle of the wings there and how it's attached on the bottom. Now, the last major part to fit is the tail section, which fits very simply like so. Now, if it's free flight, you want to adjust it beforehand and then glue it directly to it. If you're going to hinge it for movement, you will need to trim away a triangular area on top of the tail end. As we're not doing that, I am going to glue the top of the tail end there, and then along the edges all the way down where the wood's going to meet, give it a nice strong bond. And then slot the tail section over the top, making sure it butts up firmly and that it is aligned. You can of course glue it at an angle if you want to create a little bit of lift or direction. And then just hold that in place until it sets firmly. The next you're going to want to do is the landing gear, which consists of parts 25A and B, the landing struts, and part 26A. So, turning the model over, dry fit parts 25A and B into the slots on the bottom of the fuselage, like so, and then dry fit 26 over the top of them, like so. The tabs should allow it to be a rough guide. Then look at it from the front to make sure that it's aligned how you want it, and then glue firstly to the fuselage so that parts 25A and B are firmly in place. Now you want to make a nice strong bond here for any landings. In the aircraft frame is to take the wooden dowel included, insert through the hole in the landing gear, making sure that it turns freely, and then glue First one wheel on one side and one wheel onto the other, spinning these just to make sure that they are aligned perfectly. That is the fully assembled Junkers D1. You can of course add in the bracing as per the diagram, and then cover and paint as needed. Thank you once again for buying Henson's flying machines.